Good afternoon. The Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye.
Present.
Alderman Aldred.
Present.
Chair Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Keys. We have 5 present. We have quorum.
Thank you. A quorum being present, we do not have minutes from yesterday's meeting yet to approve, so we'll hold off on that until the next meeting. We do have several of the resolutions regarding the use plans for discussion today. After some discussion with the police department, my understanding is that they want to hear from members of the community, and they intend to supplement some potential deficiencies in the use plans subsequent to that. So at this point, we're just going to get started with public comment and move from there. So, Madam Clerk, if you could introduce the first speaker, please. Or I guess while we have everyone here, we'll just swear you all in at once. That'll make things move a little bit quicker. So anyone who's signed up to testify, if you could just please raise your hand. And do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability? All right. Well then, let's get started.
So we're going to start one resolution behind. So we're going to start with Resolution 186 first.
Yeah, we'll do speakers
testimony.
on 186, then 187, 188, so on and so forth until we are through with everything.
So the first person that we have speaking in opposition of Resolution 186 is Miss Annie Rice.
All right. All right, Annie, you have 3 minutes.
They're all stapled.
Please proceed. Oh, are you on?
Green light. There we go.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, Public Safety Committee and members of the public who are here. Annie Rice, I live in the 8th Ward. I'm here on behalf of Arch City Defenders. So in your inboxes, you received a detailed letter from a coalition of organizations about the spirit of Board Bill 185, the enabling legislation for this process. And the spirit is that the use plans are supposed to be a full picture of the technologies our city has and utilizes in order for the general public to be able to access in a meaningful way all of those plans, and then to provide opportunity for the public to give input to the board as to whether or not we agree with these technologies and these uses, and hope that you will vote along those lines as our representative. The use plans as presented are a decent starting point. We talked with folks from other cities and said, you know, they've seen better, they've seen a whole lot worse. So I do want to thank you all for the work that you've done in preparing those. And we appreciate greatly your willingness to take those back with comments and to revise. So because this is a one-time process, these documents are required to be preserved and posted as long as the technology is in use, and we have the time to get it right in this process. So thank you for following the recommendations of the coalition for updates and further clarifications. And I believe, okay, so this is the cell site simulator. I do appreciate Alderwoman Velasquez highlighting the some obfuscation and potentially misuse of the cell site simulator in our city before public acknowledgement even that we had the technology. So I would actually love to hear more along that line of questioning and what the responses are to that, and maybe that takes place at the next hearing once we have some revised uses. But I think the main issue that we have is that without a technological description of the capabilities of the technology, it is hard for the public to understand how it's being used and why it's being used. So a detailed statement from the manufacturer to say, this is what this is, here's how it works, and put it in plain language for people who haven't been studying this for years to be able to understand how that works. It's a technology that those of us who have participated in First Amendment activity have noticed before. So I am also curious about when the types of criminal investigations in which it can be utilized, because I think that criminal investigations is a wide-ranging term and can apply towards people who are potentially walking in a street or shutting down a building or on an interstate, right? Is that the type of criminal activity that can result in the use of this technology? So also appreciate some clarity around when these IMEI numbers are gathered, how they're stored, if the IMEI numbers that you are looking for are stored, are they kept for prosecutorial use? Are they able to be disclosed in the process of a prosecution of a trial? Is a defense attorney able to see this is where we use this technology, this is where the number was found, and here's how we led to the warrant? So just building upon sort of the technological uses, I'd love to learn more.
That is the 3 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Mr. John Shafnoff of U City.
Hello, Mr. Chesnoff.
Hi, how are you all? Can you hear me well?
Sure can.
Okay,
You have
great.
3 minutes. Please proceed.
Okay, so I wasn't quite sure how to testify about use plans that aren't written yet. So I wanted to use this first opportunity to discuss a couple use plans that I think are missing and which render the other use plans somewhat moot. So I'm opposed to this particular resolution and to all the other resolutions until we have a use plan on everything. The reason I'm taking that position is that we're missing use plans on the Real-Time Crime Center and on the St. Louis Fusion Center. And I looked up the definition of surveillance technology. I don't know if I want to take my 3 minutes to read it, but I think it's very clear that the Real-Time Crime Center and the Fusion Center both qualifies as systems that use surveillance hardware for the purpose of public safety. I think they clearly fit within the definition. And it doesn't make sense to have a use plan about video cameras, for example, without having some information shared and a use plan around the Real-Time Crime Center. A camera on the street taking pictures really isn't surveillance until it's collected and monitored and analyzed back at the Real-Time Crime Center. And they even, in the use plan for video cameras, they call it the Real-Time Crime Center Surveillance System. And so without those, we really don't have a clear picture of how any of these technologies are going to be used. Those are the hubs that are central to all of this. Now, it's possible that the city doesn't plan to continue use of the Real-Time Crime Center and the Fusion Center, and if they plan to disable those and render them non-functional, they don't need to put together a use plan. But short of that, I think they're in violation of the ordinance until those use plans are put together and approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafnoff. Next, we have Elizabeth Simikoff from the 3rd Ward in opposition.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Simikoff. I live in the 3rd Ward. My family's been in St. Louis for 4 generations. I live in a neighborhood where I do hear gunshots regularly, and I have a deep commitment to not calling the police. Like everyone in this room, I care deeply about public safety. I care that my neighbors are safe, and I want to see violence eliminated from my community. And it is for this reason that I do not call the police. I listened to the report yesterday. I understand that this plan aims to increase public safety by increasing the number of reports and arrests by police. But without getting into whether this surveillance technology is capable of meeting the demand with measurable accuracy, without speaking to the racism that is embedded into the very fabric of policing, I want to question the premise that arrests and convictions lead to public safety. The idea that we can disappear our problems by taking those who do harm does not address the conditions that cause harm to occur. We know that the #1 cause of crime is poverty, of which increased surveillance cannot address. I would just encourage, I could tell you stories of my neighbors who are fighting their way out of poverty, about the long walks up the hills to the bus stops in the sweltering heat or the cold, the long days of waiting to hear back from the food stamps office, and the child that died on my street just this past week because of a lack of access to consistent medical care. I care deeply about public safety, and because I have spent time listening to my neighbors and learning about the impact the police has on communities like mine, a system that uses our precious resources on punishment and revenge cannot offer solutions to violent crime. It can only do more violence in the name of, quote, justice, and leads to further suffering. So I'm advocating for bills and policies that promote life in our community and offer solutions to the problems of poverty and job loss, and ensure that every person in our neighborhood has access to food and shelter and medical care to thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simikoff. Next, we have Sage Karam in opposition.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sage Coram, and I'm the Legislative Associate with the ACLU of Missouri. And I want to use the time today to clarify a little bit about how cell site simulators work. There were questions from the committee about that yesterday, and can use this example to highlight, sorry, the echo is tripping me up a little bit, why it's important to have adequate descriptions of technologies in these use plans. So our phones connect to cell sites or towers to receive their service. And then as we move from place to place, our phones automatically disconnect and connect to the closest tower so that we can keep receiving service. A cell site simulator works by mimicking a cell tower so that our phones disconnect from the actual cell tower and ping into the simulator. At that point, that's when the phone's unique identifier, or that IMEI number, is revealed. So the description that this technology is simply looking for a match of a targeted IMEI number leaves out something really crucial. To find this match, the cell site simulator is connecting to and collecting information from all of the cell phones in its vicinity. The technology cannot be limited to looking for its targeted number alone, and so in this way, it acts as a mass surveillance tool when it's deployed. We heard in the presentation yesterday, and it's stated in the current version of the use plan, that this IMEI number is the only data that's collected from the cell site simulator, and that it doesn't store or retain any of the data. And that when it's activated, it sort of works as a constant search and purges any data that's not the target data. However, this use plan, as well as all the other use plans, fails to include the product descriptions from the manufacturer as outlined in the ordinance. And this is really important because different types of cell site simulators have different capabilities and are able to collect different types of data. And this can include metadata from our phones or the capacity to intercept communications. So it's imperative to understand which cell site what the capabilities of this cell site simulator are, so that we can have a clearer understanding of what data could be inadvertently collected and how it's ensured that it's not. So I want to say thank you for taking time to listen to all of our feedback today and committing to revising use plans and representing to the.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coram. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz from the 4th Ward.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Schwartz. I live in the 4th Ward. I did not plan on testifying today. I'm a librarian. I don't do politics for a living. However, what I do is explain complicated information to people about technology and how it affects their lives and how they can use it for the better. The police department didn't do that yesterday, and so it's impossible to comment on what this sort of cell-site simulator resolution even is. In the time that I did have between going to work and going to bed, I tried my best to do this research, and as a professional researcher, it wasn't easy, and I really honestly wasn't able to digest much of it, which I find really, really concerning if the point of this is to make that information widely accessible to the broad public, and I, an information scientist, cannot find it and cannot digest it. That is scary. I have a master's degree on how to do this stuff. Beyond that, I am gonna geek out a little bit and think about what does it actually mean to delete data? When we delete something on our computer, as the police will tell you, it doesn't go away. Digital forensics folks have all sorts of programs that can dig that stuff up, reassemble it, and you can download those off the internet for free. So the actual process through which this retained data is deleted is essential to understand if you actually just put it in your computer trash can or you truly scrubbed all the bits and bytes and metadata from that machine forever. Those are two wildly different things. Beyond that, when we talk about sharing data with different government agencies, I don't know how that's happening, but if everybody is making copies of this data, I'd really like to know how the police department wants to ensure that they're purging all of this data at every single point in the network that they distribute it to, and the sort of technologies that all of the people at that point in the network are using to scrub that data as they claim they're gonna do. So I could go on because I'm a nerd, and I think data's fascinating. But beyond that, like I don't care about data, I care about the people that it affects. That's why I'm a librarian, not a software engineer. And I would really like to see how the police department actually plans to use this information to make the world a better place, because I'm skeptical. Thanks.
Thank you. She lives in the 4th Ward.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next, we have Mr. Sean Moyer in the 9th Ward.
All right, Mr. Moyer, you weren't here when we swore everybody in, so could you just raise your hand, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Right. So I'm going to start my timer now so I don't distract. All right. So I'm Sean Moyer, 9th Ward, St. Louis DSA as well. I am here in the capacity as the CEO of a company called the Tretis Partners. I've been doing information security research and security testing for over 25 years. That's what I do for a living. We're a global firm located in 20 states and 4 provinces around North America, and we do this kind of testing for lots of people. In my line of work, I usually can't name who my customers are, so public research that we've done that I can name is work we've done for Google, Salesforce, Lenovo, Microsoft, Qualcomm. Okay, so we do this kind of stuff all the time. We do security testing on these devices. One of the spaces we do a lot of work in is mobile testing, and we do testing for 2 of the largest carriers in the United States. So we look at handsets and we test the security of those handsets, and we understand how you attack cellular devices and how these kind of things work. Okay, so first thing I want to say, I came back here in the spring and asked you guys for transparency and openness in this process. We're a lot further along, right? This is kind of getting down that direction, but we're not there yet. Auditing and this kind of stuff is a continuous process. I also want to make that point. Something that scares me a lot is that we bless a type of technology and not every revision and release of that technology as. So if we say we're going to put in traffic cameras, the particular vendor who we choose and the infrastructure that's being used, when that changes, the auditability, the transparency, the trustworthiness of that is going to be different too. So you have to not just bless technology X or Y, but bless each change and iteration. And that's why you need that transparency and that continuous process so that people like me can walk and say, this is insecure, this is untrustworthy, this is not auditable. You can't trust this vendor, for example. And so, yeah, first thing I want to say, in my line of work, I do lots of stuff under NDA, under copyright, pre-release products, betas, prototypes, things like that. I know what proprietary information means. Proprietary information is not the name of the product, the software, the version number of the product. Those are not secret. They don't need to be hidden from anybody, and they don't reveal anything about this technology. You got to tell us what it is, because we can't tell you whether it's trustworthy or not if we don't know what the hell it is. Okay, so here's the thing. It is almost definitely Stingray. In fact, I don't know why we're trying to be weird about that, because we're very open about ShotSpotter, that's what it is. So at the time that this technology came about, Harris was for a long time the only player in the space. But disregarding that, whether it is Stingray or not, here's what I'm going to tell you. We do this kind of testing all the time. We use MC catchers. We use femtocells. We use devices that do what this does in order for us to do security testing. So when I tell you I know how it works, I know how it works. Okay? So we all know, the story about the scorpion and the frog, right? It's in my nature. It is in the nature of an MC catcher to be able to intercept cellular communications of any type that are clear text, and also to intercept encrypted communications if it has the particular means and technology to do it. The deal is that when this was first built, it was built for the CIA, the FBI, DoD, and other agencies like that had a much broader mandate who could do lots of scary warrantless wiretap things, let's be real, right? So in that case, they had that capability. This technology still has that capability. It is a software update that's not installed. That's it, okay? When it was released to law enforcement initially, they crippled it. It doesn't have all that technology. Now, what I want to ask you is what happens whenever we inevitably kill another young black man in this city, and we have riots, and Trump's DHS comes in and goes, hey guys, install this update. Is there a log? Is there a record? Do we know that happened? Do we suddenly now have this capability to intercept text messages and all these things? Yes, absolutely, because the technology does that by definition.
That is your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer. Next, we have Mr. Jake. His name is, let me see. Jake Lionfield. He's online. We're trying to move him over, but they're not allowing me to. So next we have Mr. Jake Lionfield. He's online.
All right, Mr. Linefield, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can. All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Yeah, I won't take up the whole 3 minutes. I'm actually doing this in between work meetings, but it's good to be with you all today. My name is Jake Lionfields. I live in the 7th Ward, and I'm here along with my friend SJ, representing an organization called ACORN, or Across Cherokee Organizing Residents and Neighbors. We've been before the Public Safety Committee before as individuals who were concerned. This is actually nearly a year ago. We released our petition opposing the use of for-profit surveillance drones over Gravelly Park on December 13th, 2023. So that ragtag grassroots effort has emerged into a little bit more of a formal coalition of folks who live in and around Gravelly Park. We were happy to defeat the for-profit drone effort that was threatening our neighborhood with unaccountable for-profit surveillance. But that particular experience made me and hundreds of my neighbors very aware of how easy it is to use, and more importantly, abuse very powerful surveillance technology, despite what residents and neighbors want for themselves. So we were very ready to sign on to this coalition's letter that Annie spoke to earlier in her testimony, criticizing the use plans that have been submitted and are reflected in resolutions 186 to 193. ACORN is an organization, once that drone proposal was defeated, started asking ourselves, okay, what does real public safety look like? And To that end, we decided to commit ourselves to getting to know our neighbors more and building those relationships, and also working on improving the safety and affordability of housing in and around Gravelly Park. Because for us, real public safety comes from knowing our neighbors and from having investments in the people and in our communities so that people can have their basic needs met and so that they can thrive and not just survive. So to that end, we are here to express extreme skepticism about those resolutions and urging the Public Safety Committee to not pass those resolutions. We want to see more detail in accordance with what's reflected in the letter, but just in general, we think that the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department in many ways has a very high bar to clear if they want to even begin to try to reestablish trust with the St. Louis community, which it has repeatedly violated and hurt in so many formal and informal ways. Thank you for this time. Again, we oppose 186 through 193, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons-Fields. Next, we have Ariel. If you could state your last name and your ward as well. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Ariel Gruner. I live in the 9th Ward.
All right. Could you raise your right hand? And do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
True to the best of my ability.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
All right. Increasing policing does not make us safer. It takes away money and resources from other, much more effective ways of preventing crime from ever happening. When funding public safety means more money for our inflated police budget, it also means not funding so many other things that would benefit St. Louis City residents. We need programs that prevent crimes, not just policing to potentially solve crimes after the fact. I want people not to get hurt in the first place, and the evidence shows that solving poverty is the quickest route to lowering crime. Instead, we are choosing to spend more money on criminalization. We cannot always use a hammer to solve our problems. If this passes, we are giving police access to vastly more power than they currently have, power that will most definitely be abused. History is the judge of that. We have a history of abuse from this police department, and they can say they won't target people like protesters, but we've seen over the past year alone, police departments across the country using surveillance measures to target protesters in the name of combating crime. You can always call something crime and then use it in the name of crime. So like this kind of wordplay and saying it won't be used for protesters, it'll be used for whatever they want it to be used for. And whoever's in power will be able to control that. So I think we should not be passing any of these things. And thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you.
Mr. Ariel, thank you. Could you spell your last name for me?
Sure. G-R-O-E-N as in Nancy, E-R.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux.
Hi, I'm sorry, give me 1 moment. I'm driving and I want to.
Okay, yeah, let's go to the next person if she's driving.
She is our last
Ready.
person.
Okay.
I'm here, I'm ready, I've pulled over. Hi, my name is Inez Bordeaux. I live in the 3rd Ward. I am.
First, but before you start, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
You.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Inez Bordeaux. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the 3rd Ward. I'm the committee woman of the 3rd Ward, state rep for Senate District 5. I am here in opposition to all of these resolutions. After watching that farce of a hearing yesterday, this meeting today should have been canceled because according to the CCOP's legislation, the police are supposed to submit use plans for the community to have time to review, and then we are supposed to be given an opportunity to respond to those plans. The police showed up without having done any of the work required for public comment. And so after they showed up yesterday without their work, all of this should have been shut down, and then the police went to do their work, and then they come back with the use plans for us to that the police have once again failed to do their duty to the citizens of St. Louis. I am asking this committee to shut all of this down until the police have done what they are supposed to do. Send everybody home, and we can come back and we can try this again. As the oversight body of the Police Department of Public Safety, this committee has an obligation to follow what CCOP called for. Whether you all liked it or not, whether or not you supported it or not, CCOP was signed into law by the mayor over her opposition, over the opposition of the police, and some opposition from the members of this committee. But regardless of all of that, this is the law of the land. This is what needs to be followed. And I look forward to starting this process over from the beginning with the way that it is supposed to be handled. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Inez. Those are the only testimonies that we have for Board Resolution 186.
All right, then we'll move on to 187.
First, we have Mr. John Chasnoff of U City in opposition.
All right, 3 minutes, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so what I'm going to try to do today, there's so many problems with each of these. I'm going to try to just point out one or two things in each of the resolutions that I think need highlighting, but I don't want you to take that to, that the rest of the use plan is okay, because it's definitely not. On this mugshot recognition technology, it says in the whereas clauses and again in the body of the use plan that this is a technology that does not use facial recognition technology. Rather, it utilizes and applies an algorithm to compile an array of photographs with physical characteristics similar to those of the suspect. That sounds like facial recognition to me. I don't understand how they compare photographs and put together a compilation of photographs without using facial recognition. And so I think that the police department is trying to downplay this technology. I'm not sure why, but I think it's an important thing. First of all, in the policy that they cite, I quote, the RTC will generate a facial recognition image compare report. So if their own policy is calling it facial recognition and it seems indistinguishable from facial recognition, then I think it is facial recognition. Now, I think that's important because in 2015, there was a city policy that was put out that encompasses the use of facial recognition. And it says that facial recognition shall not, and this is a policy that was different from the police department policy, but is not cited in their use plan. But that policy says that facial recognition can only be used if there's a criminal investigation. Now, throughout this use plan, they say that the mugshot recognition program will only be used in criminal investigations. So on the surface, it seems like it's not in violation of the city policy. But if you read their own policy that they quote in the use plan, what they link, it says that this is going to be used for lost children, vehicle accidents, and several other uses that are not criminal investigation. And this is a pattern throughout the use plans. They say one thing, but then contradict themselves someplace else. So we need to know, is this facial recognition, does it fall under the city policy? Are they using it for criminal investigations as they say in one place? Or are they using it for expanded purposes as they say in their own policy? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chasnoff. Next, we have Ms. Annie Rice of the 8th Ward.
All right, Annie, that's whenever you're ready.
Hello again. Okay. I just echoing what John just said about facial recognition technology. I also don't know why the resolution itself is where it states that this is not facial recognition technology. That's not actually in the use plan. It's in the title. And so the definition of facial recognition technology, It's a contemporary security solution that automatically identifies and verifies the identity of an individual from a digital image or video frame. This technology can be compared to other biometric technologies and used for a number of activities, right? Like that, it's facial recognition. It feels like an intentional intent to hide the nature of the technology, and that doesn't bode well for public trust. We heard back in the spring, the representative from the NAACP was here and talked about specifically facial recognition technology and its inaccuracies, particularly for Black women and younger Black women especially. And this has been documented, and I wanna highlight that testimony, and maybe it's worth going back and looking at, but the idea of comparing mugshots to mugshots with the inherent racial bias that exists in the technology, knowing that they're also only comparing against people who have already been involved in the criminal legal system, have had their mugshots taken, creates a potential for people to continue to be rebooked on things, to be reinvestigated, just because they had prior interactions with the police. So wanting to highlight all of that, Amnesty International has a lot of good information about this. Particularly, like I said, folks with darker skin, particularly women with darker skin. Some other questions about the specific and the use plan. It would be great to know if we are only running the photos of suspects, or is it possible witnesses? Is it family members? Is it bystanders? Is it other folks who were in the house or on the lease or on the car title? Are there audits of Regis access to ensure that commission personnel are the only ones running photos of involved in these qualifying investigations? The question about safeguards is what specific affirmative measures will be implemented to safeguard the public from the potential discriminatory impacts of the technology, including, without limitation, what measures will be used to avoid biases in surveillance, targeting, and data collection. There are very specific questions in each of these use plans that ask for very specific answers, and a lot of these answers are very generic. And so we would love to get more specifics on all of them, but specifically with this one, I have some questions about, is a commissioned officer, just because an officer is commissioned doesn't mean that they can't use Regis to look up an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife that they're wanting to go find, or, any of the above, right? There are opportunities for abuse there, and so just audits or ways that we can ensure supervision would be really appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Sage Coram.
Hello, Sage Coram, ACLU of Missouri. Echoing the testimony that we've just heard from Annie and John, this use plan is particularly troubling because the mugshot recognition technology, or SMRT, is qualified as not facial recognition, and there's really incomplete information on data sharing and discriminatory impact in this use plan. The claim in the use plan is that SMRT operates like a publicly available image search on the internet. That's missing. Facial recognition technologies are not saying generally that these images or faces are similar, but rather they take measurements of physical characteristics of the facial image and then use that to compare against other facial images. The use plan references and hyperlinks to a governing policy for SMRT, which is in there, I think it's SO 527. And then on page V3 of that policy, it indicates that as part of SMRT inquiries, a quote unquote facial recognition image compare report will be generated. So this acknowledges that SMRT does in fact operate using facial recognition technology. Additionally, the plan raises many questions about data sharing. It's identified that this technology is managed by the St. Louis Fusion Center and used in concert with the Real-Time Crime Center. The governing policy, that hyperlinked policy, also indicates that SMRT data is collected by law enforcement agencies participating in quote unquote the SMRT data sharing project. but those agencies and their sharing and retention policies are not known as detailed in that governing policy. Finally, there's repeated evidence that facial recognition technology is biased and misidentifies faces of color, women's faces, and younger faces with higher frequency. So given the documented discriminatory impacts of this technology, how can its continued use be justified and understood? So if the BOA is interested in approving this technology, reporting measures for tracking positive identification and the effectiveness of this technology should also be included and ensured in the use plan before its continued use is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corum. Next, we have Elizabeth Swartz from the 4th Ward.
Hello, it's me again, Elizabeth Schwartz from the 4th Ward. Still did not plan to testify today, so excuse my scatterbrain. Everyone pretty much said everything that I was going to say, but I want to back up a little bit and talk as an information scientist about how algorithms work. So the way that, and about the whole point of this thing, right? The whole point of what we're doing here today is to ensure that the surveillance technology the police are using is not biased. Cool. So you can't do that if you want to use an algorithm. The way that algorithms work is you present a whole bunch of data to a really complicated mathematical equation. And you tell that mathematical equation, this is the answer I want you to get, right? 1 + 2 = 3. And you have it go over and over and over all of that data and find different patterns within it that get the answer that you want. The problem then is when that data set is biased and you're biased as a police officer, you're going to automate bias. Even if we take race and policing out of the equation, algorithms are searching for answers that we want them to find. There's no sort of like ground truth reality with algorithms. They're literally just there to give you the answer that you want with like a predetermined situation. So anyway, that was kind of a lot of nonsense, but you cannot have an algorithm that isn't biased. That's the entire point of algorithms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swartz. Next, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux of the 3rd Ward here to speak.
All right,
Hello
Ms.
again.
3 minutes, please proceed.
Again, my name is Inez Bordeaux of the 3rd Ward. I'm the of the 3rd Ward also. So we all want public safety. I want public safety. I live here. I'm raising my kids here. And so there's almost nothing in the world I want more than for our communities to be safe, maybe other than the Baltimore Ravens winning the Super Bowl. So, like, poverty is the root cause of crime most of the time. Not every time, but when you peel away the layers, it's poverty. It's unmet needs. It's unmet needs. And so in order for us to achieve the public safety that we all want, that we all deserve, we need to deal with the root cause of crime, which is poverty. The money that we're spending on ShotSpotter and Real-Time Crime Center and all of the other secret surveillance that we don't know about that's in our neighborhood, all of that money and attention and resources and hearings like this and people showing up in the room would be better spent if we invested in the needs of our communities, AKA safe, affordable housing, affordable childcare, drug treatment, substance abuse disorder treatment, mental health, healthcare, and the list kind of goes on and on and on. We can talk about, accessible, broad public transportation and some of the other needs that we have. If we could invest our money, our care, our interest into those things instead of into things like Real-Time Crime Center and ShotSpotter and the other secret surveillance that's being used in our communities, I think meetings like this would be unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. If you could sign in for me right here. Next, we're moving on to Resolution 188. Mr. John Shafnoff of U City is first.
All right, Mr. Chesnoff, 3 minutes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the technology that breaks through the security system that a person has on their phone so that the police can get to data on your phone. Just as an example of an incomplete answer, the use plan asks what legal and procedural rules will govern each authorized use. And the answer that the police department gives is to say, well, there has to be a search warrant, and it describes that, in exigent circumstances, it describes exigent circumstances. But what I want to know is there a policy in place that an officer has to follow when he's breaking into my phone? What can he look at and what can't he look at? Can he only look at things that are relevant to a specific crime, or can he go through all my pictures for the past, my phone probably has 20 years worth of pictures on it. That is not answered in this use report. And it's particularly relevant because it's been brought up before, but it's true for this use plan as well. When we're asking what are the capabilities of the technology, we don't get an answer. So I don't know what this technology has the capability of looking at when it's on my phone. Can it just go into my Facebook account? Can it go through my WhatsApp account? Can it get into encrypted files that I have? I don't know what its capabilities are. And since I also don't know what the procedural limits are on the police officer, I really don't know much about how this technology is going to be used. And I think this is the problem that comes up over and over again. Am I in favor of this technology or opposed? Well, I'm very suspicious, but I really don't have enough information from this use plan to know what the technology does and what the potential harms are. And so we're really not providing the public, again and again, we're not providing the public sufficient information to make intelligent choices on this technology.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafnoff. Next, I have Ms. Annie Rice.
You guys should have really sat up in the front, getting your steps in.
Listen, we got to get our steps in, so we'll keep it. All right, here we are again. So I'm gonna use this technology to highlight some sort of broader issues with answers in each of the use plans. Specifically for this one, and one of the in 2 more resolutions we'll get to the cameras, the category is way too broad. So per the ordinance, there needs to be a plan for each technology being used. So there's a list of technology included under this resolution that is numerous, and none of the answers go into specifics about what specific technology can do what and what the limitations are, what are the procedures for protection of the data or sharing of the data. It's all lumped together as one, and so we don't have the technological specifications, so we don't know what the technology are or how they're answering these questions. So, if there was a way to I realize it's a lot, but each of these technologies is different and has different uses, should have different policies and procedures, and should have a different use plan. One of the things, like for instance, under the surveillance data sharing answer, it says that no sharing is needed, but does that mean to the real-time crime center or to the fusion center? What does it look like for another agency to request any of the forensics that came off of this? An overarching question is, how is data shared to defense attorneys or to members of the public whose data may have been collected and then not used in an investigation? How are they ensured that their data is erased, right? We've talked about whether or not data can be truly erased. But there needs to be some transparency in these plans about when we're talking about sharing, that includes for prosecution purposes, right? How does that information make its way to the prosecutor? How does that information make its way to the defense attorney? What is available to Sunshine Request, what is not? Costs, I appreciate that we've gotten some some costs about how to, but the purchasing of the technology as their subscriptions. It would be great to have the personnel included in the cost. So how many staff are in the Real-Time Crime Center? How many are in the Fusion Center? How many staff are being used to use this investigative technology? And, some of it is part of a detective's job. Part of it is, is there someone actually sitting in front of the computer running each of these procedures? We don't know without that disclosure. Right, so public, policies. Okay, so I appreciate the publishing of a number of the policies on the SLMPD webpage. That is a first under this administration, and I'm grateful that those are there. I would like because these use plans are going to live on, we know that they're going to live on our website for as long as the SLMPD is here. If I could just finish this real quick, it applies to all of them. The policy should be included in full text in the use plan themselves, not referred to a hyperlink, especially not to the DOJ website. We know that administrations change those federal websites all the time, and we saw under the last Trump administration that he changed a whole lot of stuff, pulled a whole lot back from public view. And so the only way to ensure that the policies stick with the technology is to include them in the use plans. Those hyperlinks get broken and people can choose to remove them offline. So it would be much more clear and much more transparent to include those in the use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Sage Coram.
Hello, Sage Coram, ACLU of Missouri. Really, again, echoing what's been said before, so I'll amend my testimony a little bit to highlight something in particular. So the problem with this use plan, and that's reflected in other ones, is that it refers to these technologies, but it doesn't name them, and it also doesn't indicate how many there are. So it lacks a whole lot of transparency, and we really don't understand what they do. So within the use plan, the data collected from the technologies is stated as, quote unquote, not limited to various forms of communication, images, IP addresses, and application uses. So those are 4 really big buckets, but also including the not limited raises a lot of questions. The 2024 technology report that was produced in accordance with Executive Order 78 states that the data storage policy for cybercrimes and crime analysis technologies is 6 months. First, it's unclear if the cybercrime technology presumably included in this use plan are the same technologies being referred to in the technology report. So that's first. If they are the same technology, then the data retention policy plan doesn't match what's said in the report. And if they're not the same technologies, then there's the existing cybercrime surveillance technologies alluded to in the report that are missing a use plan. So those are my top lines on this use plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coram. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Schwartz. I live in the 4th Ward. Still did not plan to testify. We're really just going for it at this point. This one's bad too, everybody. Let me tell you why. Sorry. Okay, so there's a lot of issues with this. The first ones being we don't actually have any idea what any of these machines do and what software they're running, but I want to highlight 2 things about this laundry list of technology. First, absence of software. So all these machines, right, they run software on them. Otherwise, all we have is just a bunch of wires, and that's not particularly helpful. Those software programs, whether they're open source or owned by a company, make their money off of licenses, but then also using the data that the police put into those programs. So if we don't know what these softwares are, we don't actually have any idea what the hell is happening with that data. down the line. How are these corporations using it? Who are they sharing it with? What are they turning it into? Second thing, on this laundry list of technology, there's one critical piece of digital forensics technology that's missing, which is a read-write block. So whenever your computer opens a piece of technology or a file, it actually changes it, no matter what, unless you have this really expensive little piece of equipment called a read-write block, and you put the file on there and make sure that your software doesn't alter that file. This is critical for digital forensics because if you don't use it, then there's no way to know whether or not law enforcement has changed it or a user has changed it or what the hell is going on. And so what I want to say about this is I really do think the omission of a read-write block from this laundry list of technology is disturbing in that it's really reflective of the carelessness with which the St. Louis Police Department has crafted the surveillance use plan, and I fear it might be handling St. Louisans' data. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next, we have Sean Moyer, 9th Ward.
All right, yeah. Please proceed.
Hey, guys. Yep. Sean Moyer, STLDSA, 9th Ward, CEO of Atretus Partners. Like I say, I've been doing security research for a really long time. We know a lot about this space. I've done work in this space myself from a corporate security perspective. We also use a lot of these same kind of tools for employee investigations, things like that. And so I'll echo what everyone else has said. There are no tools named. There's no software named. Once again, that's not proprietary information. Those things end up public on procurement, documents and things like that too. There's not any reason to keep that information from us. My guesses would be Encase and Gray Key, a couple other tools like that. These are widely deployed in lots of law enforcement. The thing that I will say about actually this particular one is this does have a lot more detail. It doesn't surprise me because this is a more established capability in any department, so they're going to have been doing this for a while. So I understand what's actually going on when reading this a lot more than I do some of the others. The good news, I will say, and I'm trying to focus on the technology implementation as opposed to the ethical ramifications. Lots of other people talking about that, right? So the good news is that when you do these kind of things, there's chain of custody, evidentiary rules, things like that. I mean, you want to have good logs and good auditing for this stuff, which is great. I don't know where those logs are. I don't know where they live. I don't know how long they're kept in reality. Now, we can say in a statement, we do this or that, but if I'm looking at this from an IT perspective, I need documentation and proof in order to trust it. And the bad news is in every one of these documents, the oversight to make sure that that happens is somebody else in the department. It's the manager of that team in most cases, or something similar to that, the director of. And the reality is you can't audit yourself. The reason that all of this entire sort of process exists is so that we can have that kind of oversight and transparency. And that also means you need to establish that auditing and oversight capability needs to be outside the department. That's a fundamental principle of how you audit control systems, things like that. You can't audit yourself. So you have to have some means to review these things. That can come from oversight like this. They can come from citizens coming in and helping, but we don't have that information. Again, I can't tell you whether this is, the Wild West or trustworthy just from the documents that I'm reading, because I don't have really enough real information about it. Like I say, one thing that really jumps out is that each one of these says they're responsible with their own compliance with the policy, and that's not how you do these things in any organization implementing any technology that handles sensitive information. You just don't. You can't audit yourself. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I'm going to try not to talk about every one of these, but just the ones where I notice, okay, as a technology practitioner, do I have enough information to understand this? And I don't. And like I said, I feel like a lot of that is, for one thing, and I understand that, and I'll say that to the guys on the other side of the room, you get this audit document, you have a real job you got to do, and you also got to comply. You got to write this stuff up and provide these documents. It's a lot of work. It's outside of your day job. I get it. But we need more information, and we can't hide behind the words proprietary information because, again, software versions, the names of the technology, things like that, that's not proprietary info. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer. Next, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux.
I think we're setting a record. Okay, great. Do I need to?
3 minutes, please proceed.
Great. Inez Bordeaux here yet again. This use plan is incredibly broad and incredibly opaque, which is the opposite of what CCOPS calls for. I know because I helped write the legislation. I can't help but feel like it feels very intentional, and that's disappointing, but again, not surprising. It feels very much like it was 11:59 and these use plans were due at 12 o'clock. That's the vibe that it's giving. And I'm sure the police department was hoping that we wouldn't notice, but we did. I hope you did too. And so I look forward to coming back and testifying again once we have actual details around this particular use plan, because I think if there is a bar for transparency and accountability, the police department has failed to meet it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. Next, we have Ms. Rachel Hurtado of the 7th Ward.
Were you here when we swore everyone in? Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Hurtado. I live in the 7th Ward. And I am glad and grateful to hear that this committee will not be taking a vote on the use plans today, because as the ordinance outlines, the use plans for existing technology only have to get approved once, and St. Louis residents only get one opportunity to give our feedback before these are approved in perpetuity. The deck is stacked overwhelmingly in favor of the police, who we heard even yesterday say that they are averse to full transparency, using the excuse of not wanting to tip off criminals. So I urge this committee to not rush through any part of this process and rigorously hold SLMPD to the requirements of the ordinance in good faith without exploiting semantical loopholes. The resistance to transparency and truth is clear in the first versions of plans that they submitted. Every single use plan is full of gaps that don't meet the ordinance requirements. I do oppose the use of racially biased facial recognition technology, cell site simulators that SLMPD used without public knowledge for at least a decade, and automated gunshot detection systems that are based on junk science. Hopefully you noted in the professor's repeat presentation yesterday, he had no empirical data, only personal opinions and propaganda. But St. Louisans can't even get to the point of opposing or supporting the use plans yet because they are so lacking in information specificity. The answers provided by SLMPD in the plans are broad, vague, unclear, overly generalized, and missing key details. They included language saying that these technologies will not be disproportionately biased against any racial group in their uses, but this is literally impossible if they are going to use algorithmic facial recognition technology, which they are because there's a use plan for it. The use plans provide hypothetical examples of when these technologies could be used, and they only use violent crimes as these examples, but the use plans do not specify what the use of these technologies are limited to, which is crucial to curb abuse of these tools. Yesterday, when the police chief, when questioned about the use of surveillance technology on protesters, gave a verbal promise, SLMPD doesn't do that and we won't, I need to remind y'all that his answer, even in a committee hearing, means nothing. When, not if, when surveillance tools are deployed at residents using our First Amendment rights, the police have much more room to justify misuse with these plans as they are written now. Same thing for the phrase exigent circumstances. This phrase is exactly where exploitation and misuse of these technologies will happen, and we know that they will because we've seen time and time again with other government policing entities, including, but not limited to, SLMPD, violate the First Amendment rights, privacy of U.S. citizens and other folks with these surveillance technologies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hurtado. Next, we have online. We have two. First, begin with Mr. Gary Hasna. Could you please state your ward?
Gary Osna, the old 8th Ward, I believe it's current 6th.
Mr. Hasna, we will need to see your face, and you will have to be sworn in. Thank you.
All right. If you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
I do.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Great, yeah, sorry for arriving late, and it seems like we're giving feedback on the plans. I was able to read all of the plans, and I will send in a red line version instead of the testimony that I did already mail in. So that, and I encourage others to do red line versions as well. That being said, what I found that we needed to add to this was the number of units or instances, so we know exactly how many there are. As everyone is aware, most of the technology the department has is old and outdated. That's the second point, to add the age of all the equipment that we have and what the life cycle is on that. And then I know there are some costs, but I was looking for the current costs, kind of what Andy was talking about earlier. Secondly was the deployment plans or tactical implementation plans. I know how they're being used for the most part, but we need to really know kind of where they're at because of equity. I work with a lot of folks, and then they're surprised at how the technology is used, where it's used, and it's not used equitably across the whole city. And maybe there's a reason for that, but just understanding that as well. And also, I guess, education. I mentioned that the last time, I guess that was 2 or 3 months ago, about education specifically. I believe that should be added to this. So there's the requirement and also the education of the Board of Aldermen specifically and the public, if they would like to join, to really understand these technologies and uses, because it's clear that there's a lot of misunderstanding on that one as well. So really, that's kind of where I was at. And related to, I heard the talk about the facial recognition and a few of the other technologies as well. I've seen that firsthand, know how it works, I've seen it work successfully. And I still would like to extend, like I did last time, anybody that would like to see that through a place where it's used very successfully, I could help make that happen. And then last thing is the Saints will win the Super Bowl this year. And that's it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hausner. Next, we have, and our final testimony on Resolution 188 is Get Valencia Alvarez. Could you please state your ward?
Hi, everyone. I'm from the 6th Ward.
All right, and if you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Valencia Alvarez. I'm a trained public health professional here in St. Louis and also a community organizer. I'm just here to add another level of why these use plans are concerning to us and the community here in St. Louis, but also to me specifically and advocates of the immigrant community. First, I've spoken to this committee before in support of CCOPS, and I'm here to tell you all about Migrantes Unidos and also to explain why we're worried. I help facilitate a group of immigrants who are actively fighting against digital surveillance specifically, and these are methods used by Immigration Customs Enforcement and the Intensive Supervision Application Program here in St. Louis. We've experienced, as a community, the abuse and misuse of the surveillance technology and incarceration methods. Recently, we have faced a lot of hateful messages and messaging focusing on our presence in the United States, but also specifically here in Missouri, they're proposing even a bounty program where civilians will be paid to report quote unquote illegals. So I'm here to ask, how will you protect our immigrant community? Specifically with the cell site technology, I want to know how this is not going to be used in mass work rates and how this won't be used in collaboration with ICE. I want it specifically spelled out as one of the, how it will not be used. I also think that the facial recognition technology is very similar maybe to what's been used at CBP-1, which is used at the border for appointments made with Borders Customs Enforcement. They have been unable to accurately identify and frequently misidentify Black and brown immigrants. So I want to know how this is different. I also echo that criminal investigations need to be spelled out, but I also want this spelled out that it will not be used in immigration civil law. Other cities have been known to collaborate with ICE, and I know there have been some here that say that the St. Louis Police Department will not do that. but I want to make sure that this will not be misused to identify, detain, and mass deport members of our community, especially with Resolution 188, breaking into phones. There's something about consent. Consent is really hard with the immigrant community. It's been known that police officers and ICE agents violate the Fourth Amendment, our right to privacy, very often. And there are examples all over the nation about how police officers and ICE agents trick immigrants into consenting to this type of search, especially if they don't know English. Another last thing, I want to know what accountability measures are in place and outlined in the use plan, specifically with the misuse of this technology. Who will be using this? I think it's a catch-all, like everyone in the St. Louis Police Department will be using it, but I think I want to know more specifics. And as of now, there's only a form that you can fill out to complain when these things are misused, and I think that is not sufficient because forms are often not taken seriously.
That is your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarez. And that will be all on Resolution 188. First, we have on Resolution 189, Mr. John Chasnoff.
So it struck me
Please proceed.
fairly impactfully that we heard twice yesterday from a consultant with the police department talking about ShotSpotter and why it was a good program. What we have not heard about is the earlier report that was put out by the head of the data analysis within the SLMPD. And that report was incredibly critical of ShotSpotter, calling it ineffective, and pointing out a huge number of problems with ShotSpotter. So now we have dueling reports, but the report that we got yesterday I thought was incredibly deficient. First of all, it said that one of the reasons we need ShotSpotter is that we have a lack of call-ins from community members when gunshots are fired. But that earlier report points out that ShotSpotter actually suppresses community involvement and community call-ins. So if we really want to get up the number of community call-ins and we want to have a police department that's responsive to people, we have to look at the problem of why people are afraid to call the police department. They're afraid of somebody coming to their house and outing them to their neighbors. And we need to set up a system where people can call the health department or someone else other than the police department if we're concerned about getting to victims in time. But yesterday's report was deficient in a number of areas. He ended by saying that we really need a data-driven approach. And he's trying to create data that we can use to determine if this program is effective. But what he actually said was that we don't have data on whether or not ShotSpotter helps with investigations. We don't have data on whether or not shell casing analysis is really helpful. And we don't have data on how accurate ShotSpotter. Those are all things he said yesterday to you all, and then ended by saying we need to be data-driven. But we really then don't have the data, and that was what I took away from his report yesterday. We don't have the data to determine if this is a useful program or not. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have, I'm not sure, is this S.J. Creek? If you could state your first name for me, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. S.J. Creek.
I'm sorry?
Dr. S.J. Creek.
Thank you.
Were you here when we swore everyone in?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Hang on.
You have
I heard
3
there's a-
minutes then. Please proceed.
Thank you all for letting me speak today. My name is S.J. Creek. I'm a sociologist living in the 7th Ward. I'm also a member of ACORN. And so when I'm thinking about public problems like public safety, as a sociologist, I look to peer-reviewed scholarship. And so I'd like to share what the literature actually has to say about ShotSpotter and what it means for the communities that it's deployed within. So I'll start with a 2013 study by Choi and his colleagues that found that although shot spotter technologies do result in a greater number of police calls, they do not result in greater case resolutions. In 2020, Professor Maris, who actually spoke yesterday alongside Emily Blackburn, who's a member of SLMPD, published an article concluding that in St. Louis, quote, "Our results indicate no reductions in serious violence crimes, yet ShotSpotter increases demands on police resources," end quote. In 2021, in the Journal of Urban Health, Dr. Mitchell Duchette and colleagues found that implementing ShotSpotter technology has no significant impact on firearm-related homicides or arrest outcomes, and they conclude that policy solutions may represent a more cost-effective measure to reduce urban firearm violence. In the same year, Chicago's Office of the Inspector General issued a report finding that while ShotSpotter technology rarely produces evidence of a gun-related crime, it has significantly and negatively impacted the way police treat people who live in neighborhoods with greater ShotSpotter events, and only serve to further degrade police community trust. So on the recommendations of that report, ShotSpotter the city ended its relationship with ShotSpotter. A similar graduate thesis in 2022 found the same thing for Kansas City, and this was found in that ShotSpotter led to increased stop and risk behaviors from law enforcement in Brooklyn, Columbus, DC, San Francisco, and Indianapolis, as well as further degradation of police-community relationships. If I had more time, I would deliver a full white paper on this, and I could, but I have 3 minutes, so I'll conclude with this. Spending an additional $4.8 million on the junk science of ShotSpotter is a waste of money, and it's not supported by mainstream public health, sociology, or criminology. I suggest we instead follow the lead of Chicago, New Orleans, Trenton, San Antonio, Charlotte, Dayton, Mobile, Canton, Durham, and end our ShotSpotter relationship, and instead let us heed the words of Dr. Duchette and his colleagues in the Journal of Urban Health. And why not invest that money into public policy that actually materially improves the lives of Black and brown communities in St. Louis? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Creek. Next, we have Ms. Annie Rice.
All right, you know the drill.
All right. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to mention just publicly, because the letter is we didn't publish this as a public document, it was just sent to you all. The organizations that have signed on to the letter, the DRT campaign, the ACLU of Missouri, Arch City Defenders, CAPCAR, Privacy Watch St. Louis Palestinian Solidarity Committee, St. Louis DSA, Abortion Action Missouri, ACORN, Action St. Louis, Promo Missouri, Freedom Community Center, and Migrantes Unidos also signed on, but was after the submissions on there. But wanted to highlight them, especially as one of our previous speakers talked about, particularly the threats of surveillance technology to our immigrant population and those who appear to be immigrants under a new Trump administration and in Missouri, of all places. So wanted to highlight that for us. I appreciate a lot of the previous comments that were submitted around this. Some questions that I continue to have around ShotSpotter are, when it was first introduced, it was presented as an immediate response alternative to neighbors failing to call the police when they hear gunshots. And I think that so far the data has shown that it actually does suppress the calls for service. I know that we are working on our 911 system. It would be great if those were answered immediately and folks felt that when they called for help that someone was actually there to answer and respond. But one of the things with disclosing the areas that ShotSpotter is deployed in publicly would help people understand if a technology even is there or if they should still be calling for help. If the goal is to build trust in the community, then relying on a technology is not actually building trust because a person is not responding, a person is not being a witness, is not being protected in their witness to the crime. There's a lot of removal that happens when we insert this type of technology. There is a proliferation of guns and gunshots in our city, and we need to protect the people who are calling, and we need to make sure that we're not sending police into an area where they think that they could potentially be shot at, and maybe using guns and ending up in a tragic situation like happened in Chicago. I do think the reason or the way that this has been presented going forward is that the bullet casings are collected on site after the fact, and then compared to guns. I want to say that bullet casing forensics are not proven. There are, according to several scientific reports and legal critiques, bullet casing forensics, also known as firearms analysis, is on the border of junk science due to a lack of robust scientific validation, inconsistent results between examiners, and concerns about the reliability of identifying a specific firearm based solely on the markings of a cartridge casing. I have seen some of the comparisons of bullet casings to the guns and the markings, and they're asking you to trust them on a lot of the gaps in those differences. So I realize this is not specifically about the use plan, have some of the same critiques that we have mentioned for the rest of these, but ShotSpotter as a technology is deeply concerning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Terry Coates of the 3rd Ward.
Hello. You have 3 minutes. Start whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Coates. I'm a resident of the 3rd Ward. More specifically, I've been a homeowner in the Dutchtown neighborhood for over 20 years. I've seen a lot in those 20 years, but nothing more appalling than the ginormous monstrosity, better known as ShotSpotter, that litters the street corners like something out of a doomsday movie. I can't help but wonder, what have we done as a community of color that is so threatening to the city that law enforcement would feel the need to put us under a microscope of consistent surveillance, all in the name of public safety? Whose safety, I ask? Since when has anything relative to police been proportionate in this city? ShotSpotter only impacts communities of color. Our tax dollars are being used to purchase or enhance equipment to trace our faces, read our eyeballs, scan our license plates, ping our cell phones, and allow cameras to follow us around like we're in a concentration camp without a fence. I stand here as a homeowner, tax-paying registered voter, and law-abiding resident of this city, imploring this committee to discontinue junk science that disproportionately impacts people of color. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coates. Next, we have Sage Coram.
All right, 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, Sage Quorum. This use plan for ShotSpotter has pertinent and overarching questions on the efficacy of the technology, and especially how it's deployed to avoid discriminatory impact. Across the country, we're seeing cities that once utilized ShotSpotter decide to end the technology. We're also seeing cities that were considering using this technology and testing it decline to purchase and adopt ShotSpotter. This is because the unreliability of the technology, coupled with the serious threats to civil liberties and disproportionate impact on communities of color, is not justifiable, especially against the financial cost of continuing its use. In St. Louis, the use plan details that the technology is not uniformly deployed throughout the city, and that these decisions are made based off of available crime data. What we also know is that crime data is biased, and that due to patterns of over-policing, crime data often suggests that crime is more prevalent in certain neighborhoods when this is actually a result of much higher policing. We also know that this over-policing occurs predominantly in communities of color. For the use plan to indicate that deployment based on crime data is quote unquote ensured that there's not targeting due to race or economics is significantly misleading. The BOA has a responsibility to understand the effectiveness and the fiscal impact of each proposed technology. Given the substantial issues with ShotSpotter's accuracy, this should be truly recognized and considered if approval is to be granted. And so I urge the committee to seek further information on especially how this technology is deployed and how its discriminatory impacts are to be avoided if it is to continue. But especially I urge the committee to listen to the voices of the people in this room today about if this should be continued at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corum. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz.
Minutes whenever you're ready.
I'm ready, as I'll ever be. I'm Elizabeth Schwartz. I'm in the 4th Ward. So I have like 3 things that I've been stewing about over this one. Again, didn't have time to prepare to testify because the plans were that hard to find. So anyway, I want to talk first about the expert that the St. Louis Department brought in as somebody who works in academia. So first of all, I think it's kind of unfair to bring in an expert that you all are working with on a grant. As someone who works in academia, we know that grants are bread and butter. If you don't get grants, you get fired. You don't get tenure, it's a problem. So bringing in an expert who is materially, financially incentivized to guarantee the success of this technology and implementation in the city of St. Louis is not exactly an unbiased source. That being said, as John brought up, even our pretty biased expert told us that, yeah, we don't have the data to support this thing, right? What he did say is whenever the police fire off a gun, the cops should, or whenever the community fires off a gun, the police should show up. And I think that, I'm not sure I totally buy that idea. I think it kind of gives the police a monopoly on violence. But beyond that, what if instead of doing that, we spent those $70,000 per square mile that ShotSpotter runs the city on like actually investing in those communities instead of putting up a disgustingly dystopian monstrosity on every street corner. And then finally, librarian hat back on. Again, the deletion of this data is not this sort of uncomplicated process, and we're working here with a proprietary software developer. We don't know what they're doing with the data. If we believe that the St. Louis Police Department is truly just using this stuff to say, okay, that's a gunshot and that's not, cool. I'm not sure we should just naively believe them, but let's say we do. But what is the corporation that owns this SoundThinking doing with that data, right? They're certainly not just purging it. They're doing something with it. And so we don't have this sort of like transparency that is required by CCOPS to pass this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux.
Three minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Inez Bordeaux, Committee Woman of the 3rd Ward. ShotSpotter is junk science, full stop, period. Every study says it's ineffective, inconsistent, and has no impact on reducing gun violence in vulnerable neighborhoods. City after city is realizing that the juice is not worth the squeeze. Your own expert witness admits that it doesn't work. And even with that, the city continues to stubbornly hold on to this failed piece of technology. I'd like to see the money that we spend on ShotSpotter go to violence interrupters, which we know is proven to reduce gun violence in our neighborhoods, instead of a piece of technology that I could fool if I played John Wick on a Bluetooth speaker while standing by a ShotSpotter machine. The only people that believe in ShotSpotter in the city is the police department, no one else. And I think for that reason alone, we should end the technology. Now, I could get to the use plan, but I think full stop period right here, the fact that we know that ShotSpotter is junk science is enough that I don't even have to get to the failures of the use plan in actually demonstrating why this technology should continue to be used in some of our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Inez. Online, we have two. We have Juniper Peasant. I'm not sure if that's your first and last name, but if you could state your first and last name and your ward.
Yes, so my name's actually Emmanuel Taranu. I live part-time in Ward 2. Yeah.
Could you raise your right hand? And do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is true to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right, you have 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Before you proceed, I'm sorry, could you spell your last name for me, Mr. Emmanuel?
It's Taranu, Taranu.
And you're of the 4th Ward?
The second ward.
2nd Ward, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, so I'll keep this brief, and I was actually inspired to speak listening to Ms. Terry Colts. So, yeah, it just, she really brought home something that I think about, but I don't personally live with so much, but, I see it, we see it when we drive through parts of the city like Bevo or Gravois Park, just the surveillance infrastructure that's all around. I just wanted to speak to the mental impact of living in such a place and what it's like to live under this evident surveillance state and militarized police occupation. It is not only dehumanizing to treat people like this, but also it is oppressive and it lacks demonstrates an extraordinary lack of vision for our city. Is this the type of society that we want to be living in, where all around the signal is the environment says to you that this place isn't safe, this place is needs to be controlled and monitored and constantly surveilled and to be feared. And we see this play out in St. Louis politics, the county and the city. The idea that the city is a dangerous place. Anyway, we can't get into the racist history of policing and racialized incarceration, as well as the degrading impact of the prison industrial complex. But we do need to do the genuine hard work of working with communities and really solving the problems that create the conditions for crimes. And that the bottom line is we need to take care of our people. It's unacceptable for this to be our solution. We need to do the genuine work of making sure people's basic needs are met and that we treat people humanely and not continue to feed a carceral system that really depends on the taxpayer paying to meet prison quotas. And it's just short-sighted, it's inhumane, and it's not good for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarano. Next, we have Gary Hosna.
Mr. Hosna, 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about ShotSpotter, I did hear some misinformation, and I just wanted to address that. But before I do that, I have read the ShotSpotter deployment plan for the city of St. Louis, and I disagree. And I've provided this information in the past about the deployment and the effectiveness of the deployment in the St. Louis region. So I just wanted to say, as it's written right now, because of the deployment plan and how it's being deployed, it would be marginally very marginally. It's ineffective. So I just wanted to throw that out. What I heard is that there was a lot of cities are pulling away from it, which is true. But there is one city that was mentioned that is using it successfully. I've seen it used. And I referenced to the Board of Aldermen before that I could put people in contact and show how it's deployed, plus the police department, how it's deployed in this area, which is very small and very effective. The name of the project is called projectnola.org, projectnola.org. I'll follow this information. And also the telephone number to get a hold of somebody in that area that can provide that information in the instances where it is used successfully. And the area that it's used in is noted as being the fastest response times in to solve crimes related to the shootings. The telephone number is 504-736-9187. They'll provide you that information as well. And the last thing, I was remiss in my last statement regarding, I wanted to thank the police officers, especially the South Patrol, for using resident technology and also the public surveillance technology to apprehend a serial armed robber in our neighborhood. Last, we suffered for about 3 or 4 months with this person, and his last armed robbery wound up being a murder, resulting in murder. And then the police department, within 45 minutes, actually using surveillance technology, apprehending this individual. So I wanted to thank the department for that and give. There's a lot of other examples of successes out there, but just wanted to provide that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hasnan. Next, we're moving on to resolution number 190. First, we have Mr. John Shasnoff.
Right. Three minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So this is the use plan that has to do with video cameras. And I wanted to make 2 points. First of all, under authorized uses, the use plan says that the SLMPD currently owns 646 fixed cameras. So they're not reporting on all the federated cameras that are owned by neighborhood associations, business associations, et cetera, that are federated into the system. So I think that if we have a camera that's being used by the city for surveillance, it needs to be included in the use plan. And so I feel like this is very incomplete just to report on the cameras that are owned by the city. The second point I'd like to make has to do with the distribution of the cameras. And it's similar to what we just heard about ShotSpotter. The use plan says repeatedly that it's citywide, but then it makes the caveat that cameras can only be placed where there's the appropriate fiber optic infrastructure. So we don't know where the appropriate fiber optic infrastructure is, and we don't really know then that these cameras are deployed citywide. Now, the St. Louis American did a report several years ago that showed the distribution of the cameras, and it was inordinately in North St. Louis and in predominantly Black neighborhoods in the city. And so I think we have created a situation was testified earlier where Black people feel in this city like they are under constant surveillance, like they're living under a prison system without walls, that they can't walk down their streets without being monitored by the government. That's not the America that I grew up believing in. And I think that's what we've created in St. Louis. They also say that the cameras are deployed based on crime statistics, but we heard earlier, crime statistics are notoriously biased. And so if you deploy more officers in North St. Louis, you're going to get more arrests. And then you're going to say, well, crime is high in North St. Louis because, you know, we've made all these arrests. So I'd like to know when they say we're using crime data to analyze these things, what crime data are they actually looking at, and how are they trying to, as the questions ask, how are they trying to mitigate the racial bias that is implicit in most of the systems that we employ? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shasnoff. Next, we have Ms. Annie Rice.
You have 3 minutes and you may proceed.
Thanks. I don't think your microphone's on, but I will take that anyway.
Oh, it was not.
I think I need like walk-up music for each of these times here. So thank you so much again on this one. Okay, so this resolution is one that we identified the most issues with because it is another broad grouping. Each of the cameras have different capabilities, and I do benefit from my time serving as an alderperson and working with the SLMPD on where cameras are located and the specific capabilities of the types of cameras that were at least deployed in my ward. So they're different capabilities, and because of that, they need to be defined under each of those. So like a camera can be affixed to a building or affixed to a stoplight, but if it's got pan, tilt, zoom capabilities, that's different from one that cannot, right? If it's got the ability to view at night, that is different from one that cannot. If it's a mobile camera trailer, obviously there are different policies that go along with a mobile camera trailer and its deployment than a drone camera that is used by SWAT. And there's also different lists in two different parts of the use plan as well. So one of them has a generic number of each of the types of cameras. Then another place lists out the cost and the funding source for each of those. Those lists are different. The funding source does not include the drone cameras, for example. The environmental investigation unit cameras are also different capabilities, right? Those are deployed in cooperation with a different city department, and so there are different policies at play in there. Another thing that we're concerned about is the retention policies. Is the data retained from each of these cameras from all of these cameras for 30 days, or is it just specific cameras? Is it just the alley trash cameras? Is it the drone has this data for 30 days? Is there a reason for 30 days? Can it be 5 days, right? If it's a drone deployed in an exigent circumstance, is there a reason to retain data longer than 5 days, right? This is probably one of the areas with the biggest questions and the least specific answers. Also, I want to echo what Mr. Chasnoff said about the special taxing district cameras. If the footage is used by the SLMPD, then that does need to be reported under Board Bill 185. And so whether they're federated into the system or there is a policy for going out and retrieving the data off of those, then it does need to be reported in here. And each of those cameras also have different capabilities. So some more specifics in here. And, there are another place where having the policies in the use plan would be incredibly helpful to talk about whether or not the cameras are allowed to point, tilt, and zoom into private spaces or into public spaces. Are they allowed to look through windows? Are they not? Are they allowed to look at persons? Are they not? And I feel like each of these cameras has a little bit different of a policy around it. Also, how are they deployed? Is it based on misdemeanors? Is it felonies that trigger the real-time usage? So questions about each of those that I think are really important to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Sage Coram.
Right, 3 minutes, whenever you're ready.
Hello. Annie and John are doing a great job of laying out really big issues with this plan. Just for the record, the cameras that are included in this use plan umbrella of citywide cameras include fixed cameras, mobile trailers, air support download video, and SWAT unmanned aircraft systems. Within the use plan, there are hyperlinks to two separate governing policies. One, I believe, for still cameras, and then also video camera, indicating, right, that these separate cameras have separate governing policies, and as such, are utilized differently and maybe retain or collect different kinds of data, and therefore separate use plans should be made so that we do have transparency and folks are able to give full consent if the technology is to continue. At one point in this use plan, it's indicated as a blanket that data is retained 4 days. Not 4 like the number, but like 4 days, a very broad, unspecified amount of time. So again, is that 30 days? Is it 5 days? What's the reason for that length of time? I also want to underscore there is mention in the use plan of MOUs with other entities, such as residents, businesses, and special taxing districts. So for video footage. So again, more detail is needed on how that data is shared and retained. Surveillance and data collection are not neutral or inherently benign actions. And so this information really is critical to understanding how this interplays in all of our daily life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coram. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz.
All right, 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm Elizabeth Schwartz. Oh, I threw the microphone on the ground. I live in the 4th Ward. Yeah, okay, so $100,800,091,218.82 worth of ARPA funds have been spent on these cameras already. ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act, was meant to provide cities with money for the health and economic recovery of their communities as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still ongoing. I can tell you, somebody who's high risk for COVID, has had COVID, knows a lot of people who have developed disabilities known as long COVID as a result of COVID-19 infections, that cameras are certainly not preventing COVID-19, nor are these cameras helping people to recover. And they're not helping the economy either. I mean, who the hell wants to go walk around under a microscope being surveilled all the time? It's not fun. That being said, masks do prevent the spread of COVID-19. I'm wearing one right now, as are a couple of other folks here. I put more of them over there. However, the Board of Aldermen is trying to ban masks because masks impede the ability of the St. Louis Police Department to surveil us, to use this facial recognition technology that none of us want, and kill us by COVID or otherwise. Anyway, 7.5% of the United States adults have long COVID. Long COVID is a debilitating chronic health condition with no known cure. It results in all sorts of symptoms, from tachycardia to brain fog to chronic fatigue syndrome, and kills people. If we extrapolate this figure to St. Louis, over 20,000 people in the city of St. Louis have long COVID. Why on earth would we not invest nearly $2 million, and we still have more ARPA funds, by the way, in actually preventing COVID and keeping people safe from COVID instead of spending more money on masks, or instead of spending more money on cameras and banning masks that make them ineffective?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux.
Hi, Inez
Minutes
Bordeaux,
whenever you're
Third
ready.
Ward. This use plan is incomplete. It's fully incomplete. I know it's incomplete because I helped write the legislation. We specifically called for the neighborhood cameras in the special taxing district, that, you know, there needed to be transparency and a use plan submitted if the police department was going to be using those neighborhood cameras. Again, we're getting more of the lack of transparency and accountability that CCOPS calls for, which again is disappointing but not surprising. I'm sure the police department, you know, hoped that we wouldn't notice. Of course we noticed. And so once again, I look forward to coming back when we have an actual use plan in the way that CCOPS called for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. Next, we have Mr. Sean Moyer.
Three minutes whenever you're ready.
Hey there, Sean Moyer again. So before we get into anything else on this, I do want to refute something that was said yesterday. Luigi Mangione was not identified by the use of NYPD's $5 billion budget worth of surveillance cameras. He was identified by a picture from a webcam in a hostel that he checked in, and then a witness, right? So, we spent all this money on this technology, and that particular manhunt actually demonstrated how useless a lot of it actually is, right? So, I just wanted to refute that. When I heard that, I just kind of laughed. So, the single biggest thing that other people have already called out here, this is way too broad. We have fixed cameras, drones, mobile trailers, and the use cases for all three of those are wildly diverse and wildly different. In one case, they're mobile. In one case, they're in fixed locations. Some of those require warrants to access that data. Some don't. A number of these, and this is throughout a lot of these plans, just say during the normal course of law enforcement, duties, right? We need to understand what that means. We need more detail than that. And yeah, like I say, there are different use cases. There are different risks. The platform, the implementation of the technology is completely different. And again, we don't have any detail. We don't know the vendor. We don't know the version numbers. We don't know the technology that we've purchased really in these use plans. So we don't have enough detail to really understand exactly what these are doing other than these broad technology categories, which, like I say, what scares me about a lot of these is if that use plan gets approved with that generic kind of language, is that just in perpetuity? Is that it? So they buy new tech, they buy new stuff, and they can just say, oh, it's under this banner. And again, we don't know what these technologies do, and they're all going to be different. They're going to have different capabilities as they come along. Something that I pointed out the last time that back in the spring when I talked to you guys about this too, is that some of these technologies are very insecure. Our firm identified a vulnerability in access web cameras, and I think those are access, but I don't know for sure, the ones that are here in the building, because I don't want to climb up there and look. But the access cameras had a vulnerability that access is never going to patch because it would require new hardware, so they're just not ever going to fix it, and these cameras are all over the world. Anybody who places one on the internet, anyone else can access that camera and access that feed. And that's happened with a lot of these public use cameras, is that these technologies get deployed, and we find out that they're insecure, they're on the public internet. And security researchers will identify these vulnerabilities, but so will nation states. And so it's a big question is who has access to that data and how do they get to it and how is it secured and how is it locked down? And again, all we have on that is to take their word for it and to trust them. And as I said before, you can't audit yourself. Something that I noticed is that some of these use plans mention Bureau of Professional Services, which I learned is, I guess, part of internal affairs. That's still kind of the watchers watching themselves, but at least there is a process and something that includes some kind of oversight here, besides just, which is what most of these say, the director of that unit, right? That's not, again, that's not how you have auditability and accountability. You have to have somebody from outside that is not the person responsible for implementing that control. You need somebody outside as a third party to look at. That's all I got. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer. Next, we're moving on to resolution number 191. First, we have Mr. John Shasnoff.
Okay, I know I'm getting tired. I bet you all are too. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. It must be getting harder and harder to listen to us. But the 193 use plan is not less important than the 186 use plan. So I hope you all bear with us. And I wish I didn't have so many things to say about these plans, but I do. So on this one, the GPS usage, I just want to make one point. It says here under data collection that only location, speed, and device battery life will be collected. No personal information or other content is captured or accessed. So I find that somewhat disingenuous. Okay, so they put a GPS on my car and I go to visit my mother. So you're telling me that my mother's, the personal information that my mother lives at such and such an address is not accessed by the police department? And people who commit crimes have friends, and they do other things besides commit crimes. So if I commit a crime and I have a GPS on my car and I go to visit a friend, is he somehow implicated as being part of my criminal network? Is his information captured and recorded, where he lives, who he is, what his associations are with the person that you're trying to watch? So time and again, these plans try to seem so innocuous. and they don't deal themselves with the implications of the technology that we're trusting them with. I frankly feel like these plans are so cavalier in how they approach these issues that the police department is showing us that it can't be trusted with this technology. And I know that's a broad statement, an extreme statement, but how can you read these plans and think that they take their custodianship of our civil liberties seriously? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shasnoff. Next, we have Annie Rice.
Seriously, walk-up music next time. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I agree with John. I thank you for sitting through all of this. We appreciate honoring the spirit of the bill and letting us all be here. And, we're excited to do it again in January. Some questions about GPS technology. Again, what level of crimes are we deploying this technology for? Is it misdemeanors? Is it felonies? Why are certain lengths of time specified in data retention? Again, 30 days is an incredibly long time. If there's not an active investigation, are there ways that we can limit that? So a comment for the committee, part of your role in this is not only to judge whether the police department has answered the questions as presented, but do you like the answers, right? And so if the answer is 30 days, and actually 30 days is maybe not industry standard, and we could reduce it to 5 days so that we're not keeping more data on our citizens than we need to, then you can ask for a reduction in that. That is a part of the power of this committee. So keeping that in mind as we're going through these things and as comments are being made, that is part of the exchange of information that is supposed to be happening here. A negotiation not just between the public and you all, but you all and the city entities that are asking for permission to use these technologies. There was one other point I wanted to make on GPS here. I think the other piece to be clear, there's sort of two types of GPS technologies identified in the plan. If the policies are the same for each of those technologies and deployments, then that should be made clear. If there are differences in policies and usage, then that needs to be made clear within the use plan as well. Yeah, that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Sage Coram.
When you're ready.
Thank you. So this use plan also has specific instances of these overarching issues that we are seeing across use plans. Annie just raised the question about whether or not these technologies operate in the same way or the same policies. Given what's in the use plan, I believe that they are not. It's indicated that the vehicle GPS tracking is retained for 2 years, while the subscription-based technology, there's not data retained from that. It's an alerts-based system. So again, this is indicating that these are two different types of technologies, and it's really imperative that we understand what the description of this tech is, how it's being used, how it's being retained and shared. So on this note of authorized uses as well, it's been brought up in previous testimony on a different use plan that sometimes examples are given in the authorized uses, but it's not actually clear if those are authorized uses, or it's certainly not clear that use is limited to those authorization. So in this use plan in particular with the GPS tracking, it said that the vehicle GPS tracking can be used in criminal investigations which include gang violence and illegal narcotics. So that's an example, but it doesn't specify or limit what type of criminal investigations or charges are actually authorized for. Similarly, on the data sharing piece, it's stated that this is not prohibited, the use plan does not prohibit mutual aid or assistance requests by other law enforcement agencies. So we really need to understand what are those agencies and are there limits in circumstances for that sharing that need to be outlined. So again, we have that transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quorum. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz.
All right, 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Schwartz. I live in the 4th Ward. I don't have a ton to say about this that hasn't already been said, but this one is not good either. I'm sorry, I'm getting real sleepy. Anyway, once again, we do need to know who the vendor is, right? Like, we can trust the police as much as we would like to, but the whole point of this is to understand what is happening with the surveillance data collected. And without understanding who that vendor is, what they're going to do with it, we have no idea what actually is happening. Same with this idea of like mutual sharing. And again, you can't just delete a file. Deleting a file is a really complicated process. It isn't the same thing as just hit and delete on your phone. It's still there. To actually delete a file, there's like a whole procedure. It's a whole thing. And we need to know how that service does it, how the St. Louis Police Department does it, and how all of the departments that they're sharing this data with do that. I also just want to highlight this one is particularly terrifying in light of Donald Trump's plans for a mass deportation. So yeah, let's not do this one either. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next and finally, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux.
Yes, so I agree with John and Annie and Elizabeth. I feel like at this point, the police are playing in our face. CCOPS has been the law of the land for many, many months. The police department has known it's going to happen. They were in fierce opposition to it. So this is like knowing when your term paper is due and you wait until 11:45 to submit a paper that's due at 11:59. And while you might get that paper in, the grade you're going to receive is really, really poor. And that is what this feels like. It feels like the police department was hoping that we weren't going to notice that they didn't do the necessary work. And as a person that lives in the city, as a person who, pays my taxes and all of those things, like, I am honestly insulted by the lack of care, commitment, seriousness that this sort of endeavor requires. It is insulting that this is what the police department has given to you. And I recognize that the police department is used to having their things just kind of rubber stamped and passed out of this committee. And so I'm insulted for you. This is serious business, and we weren't playing around when we wrote this legislation, when we were in every meeting, every email. I spent a significant amount of time in City Hall trying to get this legislation right for it to be effective and have the impact that we wanted it to have. So much so, the city marshals downstairs started to recognize me, and that also is alarming to me. So I guess I will close with, I will see y'all back here in January. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. Next, we're moving on to Resolution 192. First up, we have John Shasnoff.
I'll try to be real quick. So this use plan says that the SLMPD currently integrates LPRs, license plate readers, within the RTCC. So I just wanted to make the point again that the RTCC does not have a use plan. It's integral to all of these things. Even, I forgot to mention with the video cameras, they call it the Real-Time Crime Center Video Surveillance. But we have no use plan for the Real-Time Crime Center, which clearly fits the definitions in the bill. And so I wanted to point that out. But my major objection on this one that I'm going to raise has to do with data protection. So what we've seen them say over and over again about data protection is that this information goes to the real-time crime center, that there is a login, that there's a log system, there's an identifying number for the police officer, and somebody at the real-time crime center supervises this, has oversight of it. But we don't really know what the question asks, which is what are the protocols to protect the data? Now, it's been shown that license plate readers are often misused. Officers go into the system to find out where their wife slept last night. Or, you know, various things like that have happened and I'm sure are continuing to happen. So one surveillance system that I would like to see is when an officer logs in and says he's going to look at a particular bit of information, if he goes somewhere else and accesses someone else, I want alarm bells to go off. I want it, you know, to ring at the circuit attorney's office that somebody is going into the system and accessing data they shouldn't be accessing. I don't want to just hear that there's a supervisor who occasionally looks over and, you know, how often does he look over the access logs to see what people are going in there for? We don't know. And so I just wish they'd answer the questions, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shasnoff. Next, we have Annie Rice.
2 minutes when you're ready.
All right, here again. I have visited the Real-Time Crime Center personally twice. Once around 2016 before I was elected, and once as an alderperson. When I asked in 2016 what were the policies and procedures governing the technology that we were using, I was told that there weren't any. And I don't know that that's true, right? I think that was maybe just an answer that I was given because they weren't ready to give that information publicly. But since that point, license plate readers have continued to bother me. And seeing the use plan as written right now bothers me even more. Knowing that these license plate readers are collecting all of these images of all of our license plates and storing for 90 days is insane. Like, think about all of the places that you have gone in 90 days, right? And these license plate readers that are on all of these stoplights around the city are recording that information. Sitting data like that is ripe for the feds to come in and get, for the state to come in and get. There are things that we cannot do as the city of St. Louis because they put us in jeopardy with this state, like a sanctuary city policy. However, there are things that we can do to not retain the data that would be used against people who are targeted otherwise. So we can't call ourselves a sanctuary city, but we sure can do things to protect the data of the people who live here, the people who work here, the people who come through our city. The same goes for abortion rights. The same goes for trans health care, for queer folks. All of this we really need to be paying attention to, because especially where you're going, how you're moving, we are close to a much more free state than Missouri is. The ability for they have talked about, Illinois has talked about reducing its use of cameras on interstates so that the feds can't come and get their data. We need to be paying attention to this. And again, you have the ability to say less than 90 days. Say, if it is not triggered in an active investigation, delete it that day, right? There is no reason to hold on to all of our data like that. Also, massive costs for storage of data. That's not included in here either. How much does it cost to retain all of this? How much does it cost to go through and comb through all of it? That might be a part of the software, and so maybe that's an explanation that can be given. But this is significant. Also, I just want to talk about, since we're talking about cost, I appreciate the overall comparison yesterday to 1% of the city budget. We spend far less than 1% of the city budget on human services. So I want to make the direct one-to-one comparison of what we are spending just on surveillance technology. And this is just what they've disclosed about the surveillance technology. It is not the personnel. It's not the data storage. It's not if there are ongoing fees on this, but less than we are spending, or more than we are spending on human services. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Sage Corum.
Hello.
Hello. Whenever you're
Sage
ready.
Corum, ACLU, Missouri. I'm going to ask one question to again highlight why it's important to have descriptions of what the technology is, including information from the manufacturer. There are different systems for automated license plate readers. You can have different providers or vendors for this. And we need to know who the vendor is because some systems share their data with their other customers. So even if the department isn't directly sharing data, which is also not clear from the use plan to be clear about that, the data could still be being shared by the vendor. So that's critical for understanding, especially given the rundown that Annie just provided. The other really big flag here is that retention is set at 90 days. There's not a reason for that 90-day limit, or if there is, that reason needs to be provided so that you as a committee are able to evaluate whether or not that reason is valid and able to be approved. Final point, note it's listed that there's no additional data collected in the reading of the license plates. I'd like to have more information about any location data or location metadata that is attached to the images of license. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corum. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz.
Three minutes when you're ready.
I was born ready to do this. My name is Elizabeth Schwartz. I live in the 4th Ward. Still didn't plan to testify today, but here we are. Once again, who is the vendor? What are their data retention policies and how is their data shared? Annie brought up a really interesting point about storage. A lot of vendors actually won't tell you much about how they store their data and where, for reasons that are interesting and unknown, usually because the conditions in which they store it are horribly exploitative. But in this particular case for CCOPS, if we have data, we need to know where it's being stored and how it's being handled, which actually might not even be something you can know with a proprietary software vendor, which is just a huge problem and part of why we should just not have surveillance technology. I don't think we need this thing. I think we'd be cool without it. And then, yeah, the idea that the units are specifically stationed to capture data on vehicles with no additional data other than an image being collected or retained is just like really unfair. An image is a hugely complicated data format. Every image has tons and tons and tons of different metadata fields you can glean from it. I myself, in my own research, have used images to piece together over 20 years worth of labor history with just images. So saying that, oh, it's just an image is absurdly disingenuous when an image is one of the most rich data formats out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next, we have Inez Bordeaux.
All right, 3 minutes when you're ready.
Hello. I want to echo everything that Annie Rice said. One of the huge concerns I have about the license plate readers, other than I don't want to be stalked by the city of St. Louis, is there is a huge concern in protecting the trans community that Republicans, both at a state level and at a federal level, are trying to wipe from existence. And allowing those, both Republicans at the state level or at the federal level, to get their hands on this data puts that community at risk, along with, women and other birthing folks that, are trying to access healthcare. Even with the passage of Amendment 3, there has already been pre-filed bills, many pre-filed bills to try to overturn those rights. And we recently, in the last several recent years, we've heard about Republicans tracking the periods of women. And that was with an Excel spreadsheet. Can you imagine what they would do with the sort of data, with that sort of data from, like I said, women and birthing folks of St. Louis? So I see it as a responsibility of this committee to protect the people of St. Louis from that sort of invasive technology. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. We're moving on to Resolution 193. First up is Mr. John Shasnoff.
All right, 3 minutes.
Okay. So this is body worn cameras. This is probably the most complicated issue I've ever worked on. Years ago, I worked with a group of folks to write policy on body worn cameras. And the issues are complex and very hard to sort out, and we learned very little about the policies of the department here. But I had one question. So they say now they have 800 body worn cameras and they have plans to acquire 1,000 additional ones. So my recollection is that there's under 1,000 officers in the St. Louis Police Department. Why do they need 1,800 cameras, body worn cameras? The way the bill was written, it said that if you specify a number for cameras and then if you go over that number, you have to come back to get approval for the additional cameras. So I really suspect that they're just padding the data here or the numbers here so that they don't have to come back to you all. And I think you ought to push them for a realistic explanation of why they need roughly 900 cameras more than they have officers. I think that's excessive. The other question I wanted to raise had to do with the question in the use plan was, how do you protect against inadvertent data being collected? And the police don't give any definition of what inadvertent collection is in this case, but they do go on to describe all the ways that the cameras are automatically triggered. So I'm assuming that they're saying that any inadvertent data is anything where the officer turns the camera on. Then they also say that if there's inadvertent data collected, that officer can go back to the real-time crime center and get that data, request that that data be deleted. So my question is, if an officer elects to turn on his camera when he starts an interaction with someone, he ends up using excessive force, which was unjustified, can he then go back to the real-time crime center and get that data deleted? That's the implication that I draw from here, and I think the police department needs to answer the question. Maybe they have an answer. Since this is the last one, I want to use the remainder of my time to bring up one more use plan that we don't have, which is the red light cameras. And yesterday, I think what I heard was that because they submitted the RFP before the bill was passed, that it's existing technology. But all these that we're talking about today are existing technologies. And so I don't understand why they don't have to.
I can clarify for you. They
great.
will be coming before, they'll have to come before this body once they have the vendor lined up and the things in place. Right now, they're still looking at.
So the bill says that you cannot solicit an RFP unless you have approval from your, through this process. So the only out for that is if they're existing technology. If it's an existing technology, they need to be here today. There's a deadline for when they can get existing technology approved before it has to be canceled. I'm not sure if they wait to sign an agreement because they say they're existing technology, then I think they could well be past the deadline. So
Yeah, we'll certainly be discussing all of that as we
great.
move forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Shasnoff. Next, we have Sage Coram.
Hello.
3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for walking through each of these plans with us. I am grateful to hear that these are all going to be revised. With this use plan in particular, again, we're having two different technologies under the same umbrella. They need their own use plans for a myriad of reasons that have been outlined throughout this hearing. There's 2 points that I want to raise about this use plan in particular. It's indicated in this use plan that the in-car cameras can alert the real-time crime center to the license plate readers that we just heard about, hits to the license plate readers that are described in the license plate reader use plan. However, I cannot find reference in the license plate reader use plan that talks about how this sharing is done. So I would like that clarified. I think that also raises questions, right, about how these technologies are used in tandem and what the data sharing and data protection looks like when that occurs. My other point is that there is a section in each of the use plans that is titled Demands for Access to Surveillance Data. And what this section does, it's asking a question about what are the legal standards that must be met by government entities or third parties that are seeking or demanding access to surveillance data. The answer to this question is not clear in this use plan, and it's not clear across the use plans. So it's not enough to say as required by law. The question is, what are those legal standards? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corum. Next, we have Elizabeth Schwartz.
Three minutes when you're ready.
Okay. This is the last one, thank God. I'm Elizabeth, 4th Ward. This one is also complicated, and we need to know the vendor and all of the things that John clearly articulated. So instead, I want to use the small amount of time that I have left to ask about what we could be spending this money on instead of the police, because Lord, there's a lot of things. Right now, the city has like no warming buses at all. People are just outside freezing to death. They're not safe. You guys are the public safety. Like, I know this is about the police and surveillance right now, but like there's literally people dying outside, and we're sitting here debating about how we can best surveil our community, and that's just nonsense. Like, to keep people safe, keep them warm. To keep people safe, keep them fed, keep them housed. Don't buy body cameras, buy bread. Straight up. There's so many cool initiatives happening in the city right now, filling in the gaps that y'all have created. I mean, my friend's on the back wall right there. I'll say it again. If you hug a bunny, you don't shoot anybody. Antoine Adams said that. Give more money to urban farms like Roots. With Mask Block St. Louis, we bought over 500,000 respirators over the last year with like $25,000. Imagine if instead of ShotSpotter, we had $70,000 for masks. We could buy millions. Like, this stuff isn't hard. It's not expensive. It's not that complicated. Stop surveilling us. Buy us bread.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Next, we have Annie Rice.
Let me make sure the mic is on this time, Ms. Rice. It is. You have 3 minutes. You may proceed.
Thank you so much. And sorry for throwing off the rhythm of our testimony. We had a good thing going there. Okay, this is another use plan where the groups, the two different technologies are completely different and they need to be separate. They're, again, for identification of vendors, for the capabilities of the different systems. One of the things that I just want to highlight about these in-car systems, we've had these for a very long time. I have heard stories from defense attorneys of police showing up to the repair shop with the in-car system bashed apart because they wanted to break it so they didn't have to turn it on. These are stories that defense attorneys have stories about all of this kind of technology and how it's used, how it's abused. People in the community have these stories, and I think that we again just need to be very clear with what we are spending our money on. Body cameras were talked about with huge fanfare post the Ferguson uprising as a way to improve transparency and even show how police were not in the wrong when complaints were made. But we aren't seeing that here in St. Louis. St. Louis is notoriously hesitant to release body camera footage, including but not limited to the Bar PM police crash into the bar that happened in December of 2023. And that body camera footage, to my knowledge, has still only been shown to a select group of aldermen, not the public. Why? That was national attention grabbing. And so a couple of y'all have seen it, but like we haven't seen it, the public hasn't seen it. I understand it's a part of an ongoing investigation, but police release body camera footage from ongoing investigations all the time. What is so special about this one? And why? Where are the policies to control that? I was a part of conversations on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council about these body-worn cameras when we were soliciting them in the first place, and about how we should work together on policies, because the possibilities for transparency, concerns about privacy were cross-departmental. And this is the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council is everyone from the courts to the aldermen to the police, and to our public defenders are involved in this as well. That coordination didn't happen in formulating the policies around body-worn cameras. It was an opportunity that was wasted. It should absolutely be revisited by the Board of Aldermen. As a legislative reminder, you all have the ability to set policies for the police department. You can tell them how to use these things, even outside of this process of CCOPS. So if there are things that are coming through here, this is one opportunity to say, here's how things get released. But you can do more than that, and I highly encourage that you all, particularly as a Public Safety Committee, use that opportunity while we still have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Next, we have Inez Bordeaux.
Sure.
So next, we have Sean Moyer.
Okay, so.
All right, 3 minutes, whenever you're ready.
Awesome, thank you. So this is one thing that it's interesting that the other camera use plans put a whole glob of cameras into one bucket, and then this one is separate. I actually do think that, I think the other ones should be too, but I do understand it's rational for this to be separate, because the way that I look at these is different than all the other surveillance technologies we talk about, in that it sort of has the opposite problem, which is that we want this to be ubiquitous, we want it to be public, we want to know that it's going to be archived for a long time, and we want to know that there are solid audits that are making sure that when somebody interferes with the use of this camera or disables it, that there are disciplinary actions taken and that there's a full record of that and full accountability for it. And so it's different, in what we need. We want to ensure we have effectively universal surveillance in this case. And I would say to SLMPD, if you don't like that, well, join the club, right? But if you want to go into public service, this is part of that kind of level of oversight. So what I want to see and what I'm not seeing in this use plan is details about, like I said, what's being recorded when, how it can be disabled or not, that there are logs and approval, and that there's oversight. And again, as I said with a couple of these others, there are a handful of these that do have the Bureau of Professional Services, which I guess is part of internal affairs, as the oversight. This one does not. It basically says the manager of that team is doing quote unquote daily audits. And what I can tell you about doing a daily audit is that it's probably not a very exhaustive audit, because you're doing it every day. And it's probably not very consistent, And again, it's being done by the people who are responsible for the technology, and that should not be. If you're responsible for it and accountable for its use to be proper, then somebody else should be the person to have that oversight who doesn't have skin in the game. Like, that's what needs to be happening. And I don't know who that is. Maybe it's this group right here. But again, I want to know every week, every month, every quarter, every time somebody disables that camera, and why, when a recording is lost, and why. And to get to the privacy ramifications, that is where, as John said, it is complicated, right? There are also, in one of those given feeds, you're capturing other people's personal data as well. And that means we need to have controls around it and logs and audits. So again, if it gets shared to a third party, if it gets shared somewhere else, if somebody accesses it, we know about it and we know when. And the way I look at this, if there is a police shooting that doesn't come to court for 2 years, I want to know we can still get that footage. I want to know that we can pull that up. And as has been said, that hasn't been the case, right? So for this one, like I said, it's kind of a different problem. I want to know this data is held for a very long time, and I want to know that it's universal and ubiquitous, and I want to know that every time I see somebody from SLMPD, that there's a log that every interaction I have with that officer is recorded, no matter what, you know? And none of that is in here, to say the least. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Inez Bordeaux.
All right, 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to thank this committee for having this hearing. I imagine us in a rotating circle coming up here testifying about the same things over and over and over again has been a little trying for you as it has been for us. I also wanted to thank Alderman Aldridge and Alderwoman Velasquez for, I got to work closely with them in the writing of the COPS legislation, which is what got us to the point. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for your amazing leadership on this. It means the world to the community that we're even at the point of having this conversation. And like Elizabeth, I just want to echo that we have never spent this much time talking about improving the material needs of the people that live in this city. We've been here for hours talking about and parsing through the different ways we should and should not be using police technology and surveillance and so on and so forth. Going forward, I would like us to spend more time talking about how do we spend less money on carceral systems and the prison industrial complex and instead invest in the people and communities that need it the most. We spend over $250 million on policing every single year, and we spend $0 on services for the unhoused. The budget for health and human the health department is less than $2.5 million, I believe. So more time talking about how do we improve the material conditions of the people that live in the city. I have some suggestions. Safe, affordable housing. We could fund the Community Memorial Resource Hub. We could fund transitional housing, warming buses. We can address the fact that 20% of the students that go to SLPS are unhoused and housing insecure. We could get Wi-Fi services in Marquette Park because Marquette Park was conveniently left off of that list. We could open the community center back up at Marquette Park. That's been closed for 3 months. And we could expand the hours, and we could make sure it's fully funded for the youth in our community. We could expand the summer food program and make it year-round to support the families, especially the families that we know are housing insecure and unhoused. We could get more money to the SLATE program or to SLATE to expand the youth jobs program. We could fund more violence prevention sites in the city. Can we repave the roads? There's an ongoing list, and I would like to spend some time talking about those things because that is public safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bordeaux. Those are all of the testimonies.
Great. Do we have any written testimony?
We had 7 written testimonies today.
Okay, so those will be in the drive for committee members?
They are in the drive.
All right. Then, does anyone have any announcements?
You don't want to go on list of committee members?
What's that? Oh, do people have questions? I mean, we're not going to vote on this today. I mean, we don't typically ask questions of the public when they come to testify. If there's, if people are here to answer those questions, are you available to answer questions on the use plans? I know the use plans are going to be changing. They're supplementing the use plan, so I don't know if they have people here to do.
I don't got questions, by the way.
What's that?
I don't have questions.
Okay. Then at this point, I'll entertain a motion to excuse Alderman Oldenburg and Alderwoman Keys.
Actually, Alderwoman Keys is online.
Oh, okay, great. Then just Alderman Oldenburg. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Could you please repeat? I didn't hear no one.
I will move to excuse Alderman Oldenburg.
And then Sonia seconded it.
Thank you.
I guess I have an announcement.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, so with that, we'll excuse Alderman Oldenburg, and Alderwoman Saunier said that she does have an announcement, so we will go back to that. Please proceed, Alderwoman.
I just wanted to let the folks who are online and who are in the room know that I have been in communication with SLMPD, and they're going to supplement the use plans, and I'm going to format some questions connected to what you all uplifted and some questions that I had, and send that over to them. And they have been very responsive and said that they look forward to the questions. And so, just wanted to let you all know that we did hear you. We are in conversation with SLMPD, and it is a part of why they are going to, supplement the plans. And hopefully, when the plans are supplemented, we have that hearing, you all see the results of some of those conversations. Thank you.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
We stand adjourned.